exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Hey, Tim! What are you doing out here with those binoculars? The desert isn't the best place to bird watch. Are you looking for Thunderbird?
No, Tim, no. I understand the message just came through the Ouija board telling us that a spaceship would land this afternoon at a specific location and a man from Venus would appear for our benefit.
Oh, so are you the new George Adamski or something? Is Orthon going to pop up from behind a rock?
Of course. And here comes that bell-shaped ship with 3-ball landing gear and all. Maybe they'll take us for a ride to Venus.
Okay, well, you can do that. I'm going to head back for the KCOR studios. I've had enough of this guy watching. Say hello to Orthon for me.
I certainly will. Orthon, good to meet you. You're a tall, handsome-looking Aryan type guy. Well, Tim, I'll call you when I get back from Venus, if you will. Okay, I'm back from Venus, Tim.
That was a quick trip.
Well, you know how it is out there in the time warp land. I'm back before I left.
Well, I think you're one of several hundred over the years from Earth that have visited the planet Venus, maybe more.
Well, you know, it is the evening star, and it's you get such a good view of the solar system from up there. I can see all the way up past Jupiter and Mars. Lots of planets to explore. Just like there are a lot of guests to talk to, right, Tim?
That's right. Well, as always, on Exploring the Bizarre, we try to bring some of the best guests that are out there, and I'm really happy tonight that we've got two gentlemen that I've been waiting to have them on our show with talk about their new book. So we'll start out first with Greg Bishop. Now, Greg is interested in facts that don't fit from an early age. In 1991, he co-founded one of my favorite early magazines called The Excluded Middle. I've still got some issues somewhere back in my extended collection. But the Excluded Middle was a journal of UFOs, conspiracy research, psychedelia, new science. He also wrote the book called Wake Up Down There, which featured his articles and other features, and that was published in the year 2000. His second book was the absolutely fabulous Project Beta, the story of Paul Benowitz, national security, and the creation of the modern UFO myth. Now, his current book, along with our other guest, Adam Gorightly, is A for Adamski. Features not only more well-known UFO contactees, but also some of the lesser-known, though. I bet, Tim, that you probably are familiar with all of them.
I went for rides in the UFOs with at least a half dozen. I mean, Buck Nelson and I were really tight, but I always was allergic to the dog hair, man. You know, I mean that dog had to go. I felt like opening up that port window and just letting him drift off into space. I mean, but you know, yeah. Well, he was a nice dog, but he would just shed like a son of a bitch. I swear.
Well, Greg's also the host of the webcast Radio Misterioso, which can be heard at radiomisterioso.com. And
comes complete with an ambulance every program that
if you're
the
lucky,
open window. Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
Right. Only the most special guests get the sirens in the background.
There you go.
All right. So our other guest is Adam Gorightly, as I said before. Now, Adam, for over 2 decades, has had articles appeared in nearly every zine, underground magazine, countercultural publication, and conspiratorial articles websites imaginable. He was bringing a mischievous sense of prankster Discordianism to the zany world of fringe culture. And once Gorightly connects his dots, readers are plunged into alternative universes which forever alter their view of reality. Now, Adam, of course, is the co-author along with Greg on A is for Adamski, and that's what we're here to talk about: the weird and wonderful world of contactees. So, Tim, take her away.
Well, these are two of my favorite bros here. I mean, these are the guys from the UFO hood. Adam, how are you doing, man? How are you doing out there?
Great, Tim. Thanks for having us on. Past couple of minutes there, I couldn't hear you guys. It sounded like a robot trying to talk, but glad you're back.
Well, maybe it was Gray Barker hoaxing us from the afterlife.
I don't know, but maybe it was only me. But yeah, I couldn't hear you guys just till right now. But yeah, thanks for having us on.
And that was the best part of the program.
So far, it has been, yeah.
We'll have to redo it. Let's start from the top, Tim.
All right, let's go.
That's okay. That's okay.
All right. Hey, so Adam, do you believe? Well, tell us about George Adamski. I'm sure that 98.5% of the people listening to this program know who George Adamski is, but there might be a few people under the age of 21 out there getting high or drinking beer who haven't a clue. So let's go back to that great era in ufology when every spaceman in the goddamn universe was landing in the Mojave Desert and taking fellas, women and men, I guess, for a ride. Just like they took the public for a ride, I suppose. I don't know. Well, it's up to you. But anyway, let's go back. Let's start out there. Go back as far as you want.
Well, you talk about all the sightings out there in the desert. I guess that would be considered the seminal one, the first one. I mean, there was, there's been other accounts of other sightings out there, but that was the first of, the Orthon type, Venusian, this kind of ascended master type. So that, that kind of set the tone for a lot of the contactees that came after they followed George Adamski's lead. He seems to be the, what do you call him, the father of the contactee movement in a lot of ways. He helped launch it with his sighting, which allegedly occurred in 1952. I forget the exact date now, with Orthon, who you mentioned before. One thing to look at Adamski, he had a history prior to his meeting with Orthon. He was involved in different types like metaphysics, and it was also writing
the order of the Tibetan Dawn or something like that. But we traced him back to about 1935. We found an article in the Los Angeles Times. He had set up a kind of a communal organization and was planning to build a pyramid and have people move out to the property, and I don't I mean, so he did have a history of this, and of course, even before he wrote Flying Saucers Have Landed, he did a book that we reprinted called Pioneers of Space. Back at Tim was at 1947, I think. where he claimed that he had gone on a voyage, but it was a science fiction book and not a very well written one. And some people say he just changed Jesus Christ to Orthon, but I'm not so sure of that, because most people just don't know the history of Adamski, and that was the place to be. I mean, he wasn't the only cult leader at that time. Everybody had gravitated to that part. There was Manly Palmer Hall and Dana Howard and a lot of spiritualist churches. I guess they went out for the to the desert for sun and meditation, and while they were there, the universe opened to them. But people, Adamski always pushed the fact at him, and I'm sure you brought this out in the book, that his was totally a physical experience, that there was nothing occult about it. But that's not true, because that meeting came about. Why? Because George Williamson, his crony, had received a message on the Ouija board telling him where to go.
Yeah, that's the story I've heard, that, a week or so prior, Williamson, who was kind of a prodigy. Well, let's back up just a little bit. Kind of take it chronologically. You mentioned Pioneers from Space. So that was 1947, as you noted. It's published by your publishing house. And 47, maybe it was coming into Adamski's consciousness. That's, the same year that Arnold had his sighting. Who knows? Maybe he wanted to profit off this. Maybe it was from some type of genuine experience, but it seemed like Orthon was kind of based on the character in Pioneers from Space. In 1950, previously he'd been at the Royal Order Tibet in Laguna Beach. Then he moved to Palomar Gardens there in San Diego, near the Palomar Observatory. And around 1950, he set up a couple of telescopes. And some people say he's trying to associate himself with the observatory to get more people coming into his hamburger stand there. But he claimed during that time, and he had photos to show of saucers he started taking photos of during that period, and actually gave some lectures. And some of the, those lectures, there was newspaper stories about this. So this was the guy who had photos of saucers. And so that was 1950. So all of this was like a precursor to the Orthon experience, as you mentioned.
And those photos were pretty good. I mean, there's some indication that he may have faked the latter ones, but the ones that he took passing over the moon, there were other witnesses too. I guess at that point that had come to that area. I guess Mount Palomar being there must be a pretty, at least in those days, can you imagine compared to today? You probably could see. I remember being out in the desert the first time I went to Palm Springs, and you drive 15 miles out of town. And geez, if you live in New York City, you've never seen anything like that before. It's like being at the Hayden Planetarium or something. I mean, it's phenomenal. But then as the city spread out and encroached upon us, the lights dimmed and the saucers went away.
You talked about how, there was a period of time when Adamski was going on record saying he was pushing the physical experience, but Adamski actually had some history of channeling, and I'm hearing an echo come across here, but and so I'm not sure that's the reason he met up with George Williamson, who was a trance channeler during that period, another contactee. And as you mentioned, a week or so before his sighting, Desert Center, California, Williamson, had some type of channeling or vision that they should go out to that actual location and they would come into contact with an extraterrestrial. So they went out there, they loaded up the telescope, and there was like a half dozen of them. Some of the names you've heard, Lucy McGinnis and Alfred Bailey and his wife. They were all part of this little clique that was interested in this stuff. And that's, where the stories start to conflict a little bit. The original stories were that they all had witnessed Orthon or a ship coming down, and Adamski had the direct encounter. According to the story, they were set up at one point, and Adamski said, "I'm going to go down the road and check this out," like a quarter or half mile, took his telescope and set up in there, and that's when Orthon came down in his scout ship, and they had a telepathic conversation. Orthon was the classic kind of Aryan Venusian with long blonde hair, and he was kind of in a ski suit and tight jumpsuit, had some interesting boots, which later come into the story.
Yeah, the boots.
maybe Greg can talk about that in a little bit. So apparently the rest of the group, they didn't necessarily see Orthon, but they saw some type of ship come down. Later, when Moseley went out there the next interview, or the next year to interview those folks, he found some conflicting elements in all their stories.
Well, that makes it a typical saucer case.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and so that was the initial experience. One little anecdote I like from it was, like a lot of these stories, the spacemen had come down to preach universal love and to warn us about the impending dangers from messing around with atomic bombs. And the only words that Orthon said were "boom, boom," and Adamski took that to mean a warning that you Earthlings need to get off this atomic bomb kick.
I hadn't heard the boom, boom before. But yeah, I didn't realize they boom together today.
Bada boom.
Bada boom, bada boom, as they say. But they did apparently. According to the testimony that was in the book, which, by the way, Claire, I believe Claire John was the ghostwriter on that. My roomie here and partner for many years, Harold Sulkin, shared the house with Claire John in Washington, D.C. So Adamski was not much of a writer, to say the least. And on both of his books, he had assistants, literary assistants. Nothing wrong with that, certainly. But I know for a fact that if you have a ghostwriter, words are bound to change, a little bit. So you either believe the story. I mean, Adamski is one of the contactees from that period, and I think you'd have to agree that people still recognize the name, and he still has a following. That. Pioneers of Space, every month we sell a good half dozen copies of it, and there are those who believe and those who are utterly cynical about it. Would you put yourself in the middle?
Well, I'm leaning more towards cynicism, but I don't totally believe or totally disbelieve. I think Moseley came up with some interesting research, and also the Ray Stanford claimed that when he was visiting Palomar Gardens, Mr. Adamski was imbibing of the wine a bit too much, and allegedly, according to Ray Stanford, he took him back into his workshop and showed him how he made the phony saucers that he was filming and taking photos of that were, according to Moseley, at least one version of this was made out of a hubcap with ping pong balls. And if you look at that classic...
And what was it? What wasn't one a chicken brooder or feeder or something? I think to that.
I'm not...
But, I worked for Jim, and I knew him very, very well. Jim was very sarcastic and very cynical when it came to UFOs in general. And if somebody told him something, he would not do any research on his own and would just take it as gospel. If Philip Klass told him something, well, then it must be true. I mean, he tended to believe things without ever verifying them.
Well, you must
can't do that.
You got to give him credit, though. He was the first one to really go out and talk to all these people. Yeah. The year after, 1953, he talked to Adamski and that whole group that was out there. So that that was important. He was, he was skeptical about it. At least he was getting out there and documenting a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had limited correspondence with Adamski. By the time I got into this, I guess he passed away. What was it, 65?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yep.
Yeah, he did have a representative here in New York, Harry Hoffman, who was trying to organize an event at the World's Fair, and I remember listening to the Long John show, and one of the guests who was on said, "Well, the only way that that'll ever happen is if the space people pay for it." and I guess they didn't, because he didn't come east that time. But there are those who claim that all these contactees were making money. Well, there never was any money to be made in this. Most of them traveled around on the Greyhound bus, which is a disaster, no matter how you look at it, and ended up sleeping, on the couches or in spare rooms around the country.
Look at all the women that threw themselves at him. I'm just kidding.
Well,
I don't know.
Well,
but
I'm sure you got a good yeah. Okay, that's a plus, no doubt about it. And I understand Adamski liked his women as almost as much as he did his wine.
Yeah, I would say that one thing you can say about Adamski, he became the ambassador for that movement. He was seen as the I said like the father of it, but he was definitely an ambassador for the Space Brothers. And, there's account he was traveling overseas, spreading the message.
And
supposedly met with the Pope.
Even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, and it's not every day you meet with the snuck out. I think he snuck out there, snuck in the back door at the Vatican or something, right? And to prove that he had met the Pope, he had a medallion with the Pope's a figure on the front of it that some people say he bought in the concession stand, but I don't know that for a fact. Maybe he did meet with the Pope.
Who knows?
Well, Tim, you were in the Vatican. You could have bought something, from one of the many souvenir shops, and said that.
Well, you know what?
I met with the Pope.
Yeah. On the way to the chapel there, with all the art in the ceiling and everything, there are a variety of concession stands with people selling film and memorabilia. I mean, it's like the gift shop is everywhere you look, and so I wouldn't, hey, Adamski he was a good storyteller, if nothing else. I mean, he just when you were about ready to throw him out with with the baby in the bathwater, or however that goes, he'd come up with another zinger that kept the people coming back for more.
All right, Tim, we need to go to our bottom of the hour break so we can have our listeners come back for more afterwards. And when we do come back, we'll bring Greg Bishop into the conversation on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
And welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz, and tonight we're talking with Adam Gorightly, and now we're going to bring Greg Bishop into the conversation, Tim. And Greg, great to have you with us tonight.
Great to be back. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it is.
It's been a while, yeah. Hey, Tim, you go on here, and let's get back to the desert, or maybe we should go on to some of the other accounts from that period and bring it up to snuff or up to date or something.
Yeah, sure. Well, Greg, I want to know first about the genesis of this book. A is for Adamski. When I was reading through it, there's some absolutely fantastic photographs. I think a lot of photographs that probably haven't seen the light of day in a long time.
Yeah, actually, that was the genesis for the book, at least as far as I could tell from talking to Adam, because he said, look, we've got this. I found that we could get access to the Joe Fex archives and I think a few other places and that we could build a book around this contactee subject based on these pictures that have either never been seen or haven't been seen in a long time, and that we could also do something that hadn't been done before, which is dig up different contactees. There's so many in there that I hadn't heard of. I mean, just working on the book, I discovered for myself 3 or 4 or 5, and I think Adam probably discovered 10 or 12, and dug deeper into people's stories. The main thing about doing this book that, our philosophy, I think that Adam will agree with me, is that we weren't going to just do a book where we put pictures in and then just regurgitate everything you see everywhere else. Sure. For every single article, we did as much as we could to try and go to all other sources, alternate sources, libraries, magazines. So it wasn't just, doing a quick search on the internet. We did actually find a bunch of new information about people, such as Frank Stranges. I didn't know he was arrested and put in jail for trying to smuggle marijuana one time.
oh yeah. Well, they found out because I think the plane was weighed down with the weed coming in from Mexico. But it's interesting that later on in life he did become an immigration judge. So
I think that was probably BS.
I was going to say, I've never heard that.
Oh yes, absolutely.
He said a lot of stuff about himself.
I would be. I have heard the immigration judge before, but I'd be pretty dubious because he had all these fake titles that he bestowed upon himself.
Yeah, and friends of his bestowed on him.
Yeah, I think he got a couple of them from George, King of England.
Maybe a lot of them he got from somebody who Adam's done a lot of research on, a very strange character named Ray Broshears, I think, wasn't it, Adam?
Yeah, they were trading that stuff back and forth, and there was a few characters involved. Fred Krisman, of all people, and Thomas Beckham, who were kind of on the fringes of the JFK assassination, or they'd been connected to it. All these guys, the common link there, they became members of the Universal Life Church, Yeah. I'm sure you guys have heard of that, where you could get your ministerial ordinations and become a real minister who can perform ceremonies and
I have
stuff.
one.
Yeah,
I'm a minister with that church.
Actually, it's quite easy to perform marriage ceremonies because I've done it, and I don't even go to a church. All you have to do is go to the city hall, wherever the person is getting married. And you sign a piece of paper to the effect that you're a minister and so forth, and you're legally able to marry people. So, I mean, that's on the level of fraudum or scamdom. That's I think done almost every day. I mean, witches get married, ham fasting, and all that. Yeah. I always believe. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, to take it another step, these guys were getting involved. For instance, Krisman, who we know from the Maury Island incident, but he was involved in a lot of scams with this Thomas Beckham guy, and they were on the fringes of ufology too, but they would start a bunch of phony corporations. One was called the National Institute of Criminology, where they would sell a PhD for several $100, and that's how Frank Stranges, he got his law enforcement credential from Krisman's outfit. So they would start all these kind of dummy organizations and basically build up their resumes.
Start conferring titles on themselves.
And so, if you look at certain editions of Stranger in the Pentagon on the back cover, you'll see all the titles that Frank Strange's had.
Yeah, George King did that too, but they're all religious titles that were bestowed on him by the Galactic Federation. I saw them all on the wall. There were like 40 or 50 of them at the.
Let me tell you a little story here. Back when I was with Harold, and we had a little public relations company. We had Les Paul as a client, and Peter Max for a month. We got hooked up with an organization that was composed of ministers, people. I don't know how to describe them, but one was the youngest minister in the Little Lord Michael. He was 7 years old, and then there was a sister Brenda who dripped special healing oil from her finger tips, and the third minister was Frank Strange's brother, David, who I think is also passed on. Well, ministerial, it ran in the Strangest family. Anyway, I got to know his brother. I wouldn't say very well, but we would attend their services, which were usually held in hotel, halls that they would run for that purpose, and they'd have 50, 60, maybe 100 people show up, and then at the end of the service, they would line up and give a donation, usually in a sealed envelope. But I know I'd be backstage a couple of times and then get real pissed because they'd open up the envelope. Instead of having cash in there, people would stuff envelopes and seal it. See, paper towels or napkins or something like that, and give it to them, and they think it was a donation. But I asked brother Dave Strange just about Frank's UFO claims and about Valiant Thor. And you know what his brother said to me? He said, if Frank got away from the UFOs and this guy from Venus, he'd be very successful doing what he does. But he insists on, and he was right. He was right. It was just totally unorthodox. Why would you make up, something like that and go on the road and mix that with Christianity? It's like oil and water; it doesn't mix. And I even spoke at his church there that he had in the apartment building in Van Nuys. He didn't have the world's largest congregation, but people came to hear more about Valiant Thor than they did about Jesus.
Yeah, well, that would be more of a draw. Valiant Thor is bigger than Jesus now.
Well, Valiant Thor is really nothing more than the modern day version of the Messiah and prophets and all of that.
Well, all these guys were.
Yeah. I mean, the faces are the same. It's just that the gods are different now.
Yeah. Let's move on a little. Greg, tell us about some of the other unusual characters that you found out about.
My favorite, and Adam's going to know this, is a woman. She isn't, known as a classic contactee. In fact, there are some people in the book that aren't known as classic contactees, but they had the earmarks of it, like Charles Hickson, which we can talk about. But my favorite was this woman named Paulina Peavy. She was born in 1900. She died in 1999. And when she was growing up, apparently her father told her that education was wasted on women and he didn't want her to go to college or anything like that. So she got out of the house as quickly as possible, went to school, got an art degree, and moved out to California. And in her 20s, she married some guy who I guess was kind of abusive. And then he left the family and she was destitute. She had to get a job teaching art. But this whole time, she had been doing art almost secretly, and at some certain point, she visited a medium. I think might have been Long Beach. We keep going back to Long Beach, like Adamski with his Order of Tibet. And the medium told her that there was that something was trying to get in contact with her, like an extraterrestrial or a god or something like that. So she either contacted or got into her head that she contacted a being called Lakaimo. That's what she called it. And she said for the rest of her life, she channeled all of her artwork was channeled through this person. And if you go on YouTube, you can actually, I think on YouTube, there is a recording of her. Well, it's linked from her site too. I guess she's a fairly popular artist now. It's one of those outsider artists that gets discovered later and becomes a sensation. Anyway, there's a recording of her on Long John channeling Lakaimo, and it's amazing. I mean, right in the middle, Long, and I think the other guest is Andy Sinatra, the Mystic Barber.
The Mystic Barber. Oh, what a great gentleman. We used to he used to come to all of the meetings, and then we'd go out and eat at the local all-night cafeteria there.
Tim, of course you would know Andy Sinatra.
Tim would know Andy Sinatra.
And then there was Alex McNeil, who was the world's tallest contactee.
Oh, we missed. We didn't put him in the book.
No.
Damn it!
I talked to him a couple of years ago. He had
Second
moved
edition.
to. If he's still alive, he was living down in North Carolina, and of course he told the story. In fact, he got laughed out.
The tallest contactee, huh?
Yeah. It's about 7 foot tall, pretty tall guy there. You'd really have to, pardon the expression, look up to him. He was walking through, I think, the junkyard out there in Queens, looking for like some tires for his car or something, and the spaceship came down, and they asked him on the air, what did he do for a living? He said he worked in a button factory, and Alan Burke said, well, it sounds like you lost all your buttons or something to that effect. Who else would know this stuff? What a trivial mind I have. Look at that.
That's a great one. God, we would have put him in the book if we wouldn't have known.
Yeah, the guy was so tall he could hunt UFOs with a rake.
That's why the Space Brothers saw him, because he was taller than everybody else.
His head was above the clouds.
Maybe they came to get some tires too.
Yeah, he could go play basketball on Venus or something. That'd been great. Anyway, Paulina Peavy, she channels on this program, and if you go to the Paulina Peavy website and look it up, there's a file. I think it might be YouTube. Anyway, and during the channeling, for some reason, she wore a mask. She made all these facial masks out of rhinestones and velvet and stuff. And she said she had to wear the mask to channel Lakaimo. So during the show, I mean, there's a picture of her on the show with the mask on, and Long John actually describes the mask while she's sitting there. So you can see the picture, and he goes, oh, it's kind of got a velvet, and it's kind of this chartreuse color, and it's got some very elaborate jewels and things hanging off of it. And in the middle of the show, they ask her what it's like to, contact these people, and she just starts talking in her regular voice, and then suddenly she goes, this is the voice now. We are speaking through Paulina. This is not Paulina right now, and she goes on for about 10 minutes. It's wonderful. I mean, I've people. I don't know what it is with this. That I should be laughing, but I'm fascinated and happy. I almost feel like I should be. While I'm listening to Paulina channel, I believe she's channeling, and it's wonderful. I just like it's funny. You could say I like the honesty of it. While people are saying, well, she was probably, messing with people. I think she really thought, really believed, and may have even been channeling something, some person, some part of her, maybe an extraterrestrial being. I have no idea. I'm like Adam. I kind of think I do not pass judgment, because if I don't pass judgment, I can enjoy and listen and pick up a lot more than if these people are full of crap, or or if I think I completely 100% believe them. Those people annoy me almost more than the skeptics. Actually, they do.
Well, I'd probably pass judgment more than Greg, but yeah, I got the same vibe when I heard that Paulina Peavy clip. I wasn't laughing. It was like, wow, this is really interesting. She sounds like something's going on here,
Yeah, it was a performance. It was a real performance. I mean, a channeled performance.
The mystery of my paintings, which started coming 25 years ago. And in order to receive us and maintain herself, she has had to build up her electrodes to meet our high voltage.
And her artwork's beautiful too. I mean, I'd say outsider. She's not really outsider. She was an accomplished artist.
Oh yeah.
She knew what she was doing. She got assigned, I think, in the Pan Pacific Exposition in San Francisco, I believe it was, to create these huge murals, which she did. You can find those online. I also found that she said she exhibited at some gallery, and people were like, well, I don't think she actually did that. I found an ad in the LA Herald Examiner or the Times Mirror or something like that with that. it was just an ad for her being at, having a show at a gallery. At the time, she said she was having shows at that gallery, so she didn't lie about it.
Well, there were a couple of California. That was the hotbed of all of this stuff. It never really was that much activity back east here. I mean, a lot of the contactees did, come into town. I guess they did the Greyhound, what I call the Greyhound circuit. I mean, they would go to Cleveland and in Chicago and Milwaukee. There was always somebody, a local promoter, just like you had rock band promoters, back in the 70s and all. You would have UFO promoters, and they would bring these people into town and put them up and feed them for a couple of days, and they would rent a hall. In some of the early crowds, I mean, I know in the Detroit, I think Flying Saucer Group, they got maybe 800 people for Adamski. But when they got here to New York, unless they were on the Long John Neville show, it was hard to get an audience. I know I helped Jim. He had his UFO group, and usually we'd have anywhere from 60, 70 people. But if they were on Long John the night before, he'd have to, make arrangements with the Hotel Diplomat or the Woodstock to get a slightly larger room. And every once in a while, he did a crowd of 300 people. I remember one night, Gray Barker and Ivan T. Sanderson was due to give a lecture, and Jim figured maybe he'd get 100 people. Now, in those days, admission, I think, was 50 cents. And then he raised it to $1 so he could make some money. and there were so many people that showed up because I think Barker had been on the Long John show the night before that they had to take two rooms, and they were going simultaneously and switching back and forth. Where today, boy, you'd be lucky to get 15 people to show up at the public library for a UFO meeting, because they're all watching this stuff, on YouTube, and thousands are listening to us right now.
People go to conventions still. I still see them there.
Yeah.
There's not hundreds of people. There might be, you might get 100 at a big MUFON like local meeting.
Yeah. I don't think there's too much. Pat Marcatilio keeps his library group going down there in Borden town, and then there's an active, I think, MUFON group maybe in Pittsburgh or around there, But channeling started out there for the most part in California. They used to go out to a Giant Rock and go under the rock itself, and Ashtar would come through.
Yeah, to George King. I've been out there recently. Somebody has dug out under the rock, and you can kind of see where the rooms were. They've almost dug into the rooms. So I actually crawled underneath the rock after throwing a bunch of stones in there to make sure there was snakes. But I climbed in there and tore my shirt on something, and there's rebar sticking up, but you can see where the stairway goes down underneath the rock. So at some point, somebody might dig it out. I don't know who dug it out or who thought it was a good idea, but a couple people got mad at me. It's like, why are people digging? That's not right. It's like, well, screw that. I want to go down and see.
Yeah. Well, somebody got tell the story about how the guy got blown to bits down there.
Frank Kreitzer. Yeah, he was a prospector, lived out in the desert. He actually befriended George. Van Tassel.
Yeah.
But he lived out there in the 30s, 40s until he was not cooperating with the authorities. And they came out and tried to serve him a arrest warrant, or at least they wanted to question him. He freaked out and holed up in his room under the rock, and somehow, either while he was fighting them or maybe suicide, who knows, the dynamite that was down there got ignited and it blew up and killed him. Actually, our friend Barbara Harris told me a while back that there's evidence that he was hiding. He was German extraction.
Yes.
That's part of the reason, I guess, they were suspicious of him. But
and he had an antenna on top of the rock, I understand, because he was a ham radio operator.
Was he?
Quite common out there. So they thought he was broadcasting to the Fuhrer or something to that effect.
Maybe that was part of it.
Yeah.
Barbara told us he might have been hiding Japanese families during World War II, because they didn't want to have to go to the internment camps. I'm still waiting for more evidence of that, but that's a fascinating piece of history to me, if that's true. But yeah, he met Van Tassel at a gas station when his car broke down in Santa Monica, because Van Tassel at the time was working for who was a millionaire? Hughes Aircraft. Yeah, he was working for Hughes Aircraft, and he was a pilot, which makes him near and dear to my heart, because I also have a pilot's license. But he told Van Tassel about this place he had in the desert. Van Tassel went out there and started visiting him, and when he got offed by the sheriffs, Van Tassel moved out there with his family, probably much to the chagrin of his wife and kids, and or daughters, and started basically a fly-in dude ranch there, and that's how that was even before he started doing channeling of Ashtar and all the other people that he was channeling out there underneath the rock.
Did you meet Daniel Boone?
Yes, I have met Daniel Boone Van Tassel. Yes, he married one of Van Tassel's daughters, and then took his part, hyphenated his name, because he was a follower and admirer of.
He's the only person that I know of that went nude aboard a flying saucer. He claimed.
I hadn't heard that story. I knew.
I hadn't heard that either. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, yes,
he
should have. He needed to go. There was no indoor plumbing, so I guess the outhouse was out back somewhere, and so there was no reason. I mean, in the middle of the desert, no reason to get dressed or put on your coveralls or anything. So he headed to the the outhouse, buck ass naked, and there's Selgonda, and they invited him on board the ship, and he said, "Well, I don't think I can go this way." And they said, "Don't mind it. We walk around naked on Venus all the time," or whatever they said to him. And he told the story with a very straight face. And I figured, man, he's got, you got a great story there. I don't think he told that to many people, but he sat around behind the camper there, drinking a can of beer and telling. He looked like, I mean, if you want to visualize him, like he was a stand-in for somebody from ZZ Top.
Yeah, he looked like Gabby Hayes.
Yeah. There you go.
All right. Well, with that, I think Tim, let's we're going to have to go to our top of the hour break. So when we come back, we will continue this conversation about Gabby Hayes from outer space and other interesting characters in the early contactee movement on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned for more.
Exploring the Bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, back for the second hour of Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz with Tim Beckley and our guest Adam Gorightly and Greg Bishop, and we're talking about the wild and woolly world of the contactees that reigned. What would you say, Tim, from the 1950s to the 60s, probably? Little gray guys kind of shoved them aside.
Yeah, it kind of got started. It was the offshoot to some extent of the spiritualist movement. A lot of people, I think, from the early contactee days in California had experiences where space people started materializing at seances. Dana Howard, we published a couple of her up Rainbow Hill, and she was out in the desert. Is that story in your book, guys, about how the Venusian woman appeared?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, Dana Howard's in there. I found the church that she first did her channeling at in right near downtown LA.
Yeah, and that was apparently that vision was like in the late 30s. Her initial image, of Diana.
Yes, I am Diana from Venus.
Okay, well now, speaking of women, I mean, the contactee movement wasn't exclusively a boys' club. There were a lot of women involved, and one of them was Barbara Hudson. I don't think a lot of people are familiar with that name.
Yeah, let me. I'll be lazy here, and let me read the first paragraph of Barbara Hudson's entry. Then I'll let Tim take it a little bit, and I can add into what he has to say. But this is where it all started. In 1955, 15-year-old Barbara Hudson witnessed a tall man enter her bedroom in the early morning hours. He sent light beams from his eyes into hers, inducing a trance state. This mystery man extended his hand and asked Barbara to follow. Trusting soul that she was, Hudson accepted the tall man's hand, who led her into the living room where a gray mist had formed. Hudson soon found herself in what appeared to be an elevator that transported her up into a room with many instruments and multicolored lights. One wall of the room featured an image of Earth on a screen surrounded by tall people seated around control panels. Afterwards, Barbara was treated to a meal comprised only of fruits, and then back down the elevator through the living room's gray mist, she returned to bed. That was her first experience in 1955. Tim?
Well, well, we met Barbara Hudson. She lived in Harlem. She was a African American, and I would say when we met her, maybe she was in her hard to say, maybe mid 20s, but she attached herself to Jim Moseley's UFO group and would come to the meetings, and she claimed that she was involved with an organization that she simply called the group.
Right.
And they had their headquarters, I think, somewhere maybe in New England. And every once in a while, they would come and they would pick her up at her house in Harlem, and drive her out to this location and tell her, I guess, about the space brothers. Kind of like an American version of what is it? The Italian, the friendship group. Where they're supposedly living here. Now, Barbara always had stories to tell, and some of them were some pretty damn good stories. She said that when she was a young girl, they were driving home, going past Central Park, and there were all these military trucks and all, and some spotlights. And they were pointing at both an object in the sky and something that had landed in the park. And she claims that it was a UFO that had crashed in Central Park. I mean, some of the stories they just seemed very outrageous. But I spent quite a bit of time with her, both on a professional and on a social level, and she never wavered from telling this the story, and she was very personable and very well spoken, and she seemed to know what was going on. I don't think she had, or she claimed she didn't have much of a background in this. She had read later on, I guess, some of Adamski's books, but then again, who hadn't,
Yeah.
It was kind of strange because culturally, she kind of didn't fit in. I mean, Jim would always say something about, there are no black people involved in the UFO field. Well, that's not true either. Jim never really did too much in, like I say, in the way of investigation. You talk about Adamski. Well, yeah, the first couple of years when Jim started out after he graduated from Princeton, he packed his car and he headed west, and he did do some, footwork, field research but later on in life, he didn't really seem to care. To be honest with you, he just believed what if you told him something, Greg, he'd take it for gospel. I mean, I don't know. It's just the way that was his attitude about the subject. He was. Did he believe in UFOs? Yes, to some degree. Did it matter to him? Yeah, to some degree. Was he doing it to make money? He didn't need money at the time, and there's never really any money to be made. Although I guess at the peak of Saucer News, when he was getting on the Sandy Becker show and on
Long John,
Chuck McCann, Long John and Chuck McCann, and at the height of the Michigan flap, he had 10,000 subscribers. Because I worked in the office, and he had an office here on Fifth Avenue, which I took over after he split for, Florida. In those days, you could rent an office. The office rent was $60 a month. Can you believe that?
What I find interesting about her, that she turns up in different books, like Gray Barker at Giant Rock, and it's her, Gray Barker, and Jim Mosley going out to. Yeah. And Barker and Mosley are kind of on a bender, and here's Barker, a gay guy, and there's a black young lady.
Oh yeah,
and Mosley.
We went down to Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Yeah, she turns up in that story as well. She's mentioned in the.
We drove down there, and the South was still. You couldn't drink
the South.
The South was the South, yeah, and you couldn't even drink in the hotel. You had to join. If you stayed in the hotel, you could join their membership club.
Yeah, and drink there.
And they would have a bar and a little dance floor there, and Barbara liked to party and dance and all, and you would get kind of like quizzical looks in those days. You might still now, actually, I don't know, but it was an experience, and we all had our Flatwoods monsters.
Oh, well, that's interesting. You bring that up because we have a photo in the book of Barbara posing with some little Flatwood monsters, little replicas.
Yeah,
they look like incense burners.
Gray used to. Yeah, candle holders is what they were. I had one of them.
I want one.
Great. You can still get it. They have a store down there in Flatwoods that sells all this stuff. If you see the
I'm going,
Flatwoods monster, you got. How many festivals are there now, guys, around the country? We went to one in Pine Bush. We went to one in Pine Bush that lasted about 3 minutes. Actually, the police car had 2 men in black sitting in the back. But they had lectures. There was Linda Zimmerman and Peter Robbins and Mark Brinkerhoff showed up, and I was there 25 years ago when people were having sightings on a regular a level. So is there still a contactee movement?
I don't think it's called the contactee movement anymore. There's still people that say that they're in contact with extraterrestrials or aliens or whatever. But probably the most famous exponent of that, obviously, is Whitley Strieber. But I wouldn't call him a contactee in the kind of normal classic sense. There are many others that claim contact as well, but they're not as well known, and it's a lot more dispersed than it used to be.
It's more niche. It's more niche now. There's still some that claim. A lot of them seem to be in other countries, but it's all light and love, and they're Orthon looking type of entities. Yeah, it's more of a new age type thing,
Is there anybody outside of Bob?
Nazis from outer space.
And anybody outside of Bob Short who's still alive from that era?
Oh, geez, I don't know.
Yeah, there is, but I'd have to go through the book, and Short's still around. I haven't heard much from Bob in
Barbara Hudson's still alive, apparently.
Well, I don't know. Where is she?
I don't know. I just said born 1940, but I don't know. The track kind of went cold on her.
Omnek Onyx is still alive, I think.
Yes. Yep. She would be. Venus disappeared. She's
covered in the book. Yeah.
Yeah. She. I introduced her at Jim Mosley's UFO conference, and most of the people had come, or I guess quite a few people out of the thousands had come to hear her story, because Long John had built her up. I don't know for how many days on his show, and I guess she was the first visitor from Venus who had appeared in physical body. Now, the story goes that she, in her former life, had been a prostitute, and she was walking through Central Park. I guess she was having a bad day or a bad situation and all. And all of a sudden, a ship appeared, and she swapped places with the woman from Venus. I don't think physically, but like a walk-in type of a thing.
The official story, and I actually got a lot of this from you, Tim.
Yes. We published the book. Yeah.
Now, there wasn't anything about prostitute in the book, but that her human counterpart had committed suicide was the story, and that the Venus took over her body, whoever her earthly counterpart was.
Oh yeah, that was the Omnek Onyx story.
Yeah, it's similar to Omnek Onyx.
Yeah. And she did go on the road for a while. She sang folk songs. She wrote, and she was like a peace pilgrim. She would travel from place to place, and I remember she liked her cats. She had a place, and I think she moved eventually down to Florida. But then she got we had published the book, which was not a great seller. I mean, it was a stapled thing in the beginning. And then she seemed to have kind of maybe grown a little bitter, or kind of wanted to put, maybe the lady went back to Venus and they swapped spirits again or something. I don't know. She just seemed to have at some point maybe realized that the message wasn't getting across, as well as it should be. Well, who would you say that you believe? I mean, is there anybody out there that we haven't mentioned that you would say had some experiences that might have actually been of a physical nature and transpired pretty much according to their stories?
Well, when you say belief, it's more of a matter like, we talked about
evidential, maybe. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a tough one there. Who knows? You can't say for sure, but the stories that impress me are Paulina Peavy, who we talked about, Joe Simonton. I found, that's a story that a lot of people know about. Yeah. And that's one that Hynek and others, they couldn't find any holes in his story, and there was nothing. They
were in the pancake. The holes were in the pancake.
Yeah, but there was nothing to suggest that he was a fibber, that he was trying to bring attention to himself. There wasn't any subsequent stories, any other contacts after that. So there's a number of those, or Filio
Angelucci.
Yeah. For some reason, I had trouble saying his first name. Is it Orfeo or
Orfeo?
Orfeo.
Yeah, Orfeo.
I find
I think his son or daughter showed up at one of Pat Marcatilio's convention. I mean, maybe 10 or 15 years ago or something. Because Orfeo was originally from Trenton before he moved out to California. He was in very bad health. I think, wasn't that a part of the story?
I don't know about that part of it. No.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah. I know.
That's right. Yeah, like a lot of people, he moved out because he had the consumption or something, so he had to come out to a drier climate.
Boy, you can't get any drier than a Joshua tree in those days. I remember going out there for the first time, and I think I got into town like at noon, and people are walking around carrying umbrellas on a sunny day to keep the sun, the sun off of them, and wearing long sleeve shirts. They were a hardened crew in those days. It was a lot more primitive. It would be, and some people a little bit. They didn't even have running water. I mean, they would go and buy 100 gallon jugs of water and had a little water tower or whatever behind their home.
The water truck would
I mean,
come out and deliver. Yeah.
It's and I even remember when Diane Tessman lived out there. The UPS, they got to the end of the road where she was, and the wheels started to grind because they hit the sand. And one time coming back from Giant Rock, I was with Bill Cox and a few other people in his little Volkswagen Bug, and we got stuck in the sand.
Yeah, you have to know how to drive in sand out in the desert.
Oh man, I tell you now that's too hot out there. I like the the heat. I don't like the winter, but that's a little much. So how about Truman Bethram? I mean, what do you think about his experiences?
That's your article, Adam. Yeah, Adam generally did the first half of the alphabet, and I generally did the second half of the alphabet. Although Adam ended up writing more than I did.
How many entries are there in the? How many entries are there in the book? I haven't seen a copy. I need to get a hold of a copy here. But how many entries are in the book?
I will get you a copy, Tim. I was actually counting them before the show because I thought you might ask that question. I was thinking off the top of my head. It was 50. 50, but it's more like 100.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, like I said, that probably fully a third of the people in there I'd never heard of, and that made me really happy. Including the ones, that's because I saw something on Facebook the other day. It's like, has anybody seen this book? Is it just a retread or what? Because that's what usually, and I actually came in and said, no, we found a lot of new people. The person was like, oh, okay. He didn't expect the author to actually come in and say anything.
Let me take a letter of the alphabet. D. Who do you got under D?
There's not a lot of D's. I think there's only one D, oddly enough.
Yeah, Woody.
Yeah, it's Woody Durenberger, and I thought it's interesting that it's interesting that you asked that because when I was going through the table of contactees, and that's what it's called in the book. There's only one D, which is awfully strange, and it's Woody Durenberger. Why did you ask that question?
Why did I ask the question? I don't know. I did. It just
because Tim is psychic. He zeroed in on the one letter. There's just one person.
How about, I bet you have a Z.
Probably not.
No Z. There's no Z and no Q.
Now Durenberger's another interesting one. He's like Paulina Peavy and a few of these other ones that they had Air Force people came out and he was interviewed by the television stations, and once again it was like Simonton. This guy seems legit. He has no reason to be making up the story, but the story got pretty bizarre.
It did. Well, I met Woody a few times. When I had, in fact, I just found the brochure the other day. When we had the New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences, which was one of the first medical centers in the country, he came into town. We got him on Long John, and he lectured for us. I think a couple of hundred people showed up, and he spent the evening with his author Harold Hubbard at our occult center. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Witch Hazel stayed over that night and slept in her coffin. And on the way to the restroom, Harold Hubbard fell into the coffin. So I don't know. Just a lot of weird shit went on. I mean, we didn't have your normal metaphysical center here. I mean, it would blow some people's minds to say.
What was your gut feeling about? What was your gut feeling about Woody?
Well, I don't know. My gut feeling about any of these contactees, or most of them, some of them are, I wouldn't say, again, hucksters, because there's no real money to be made in this unless you enjoy traveling and sleeping on people's couches.
Well,
some people
it's
had a message that they wanted to get.
Don't you think it would go beyond monetary? That you're getting adulation and that type of stuff.
They want to get. Yeah, they want to. Yeah, well, yeah, and they want to get a message across. It was kind of the early hippie movement to some degree. I mean, it didn't have long or anything like that, but it was peace, love, and all, and all of that. And
all right, Tim, let me interrupt you here. Tim, let me interrupt you because we have to go to our bottom of the hour break. So when we come back, we'll continue with more peace, love, and the Space Brothers on Exploring the Bizarre.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to the final segment of Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we're talking with Adam Gorightly and Greg Bishop about their book, A is for Adamski, dealing with the colorful characters of the early flying saucer contactee era. And guys, Tim Beckley, he made a good comment that I want to follow up on. Where he said that a lot of these characters were like the early hippies, and if you look at a lot of the 1950s contactees and the message that they were going out, very much they seem to be like the precursor to the whole hippie counterculture movement that came about 10, 15 years later.
Greg, take it away. I could take it away too. I think I talked about this on Coast to Coast.
I'll go as long as I can before I go. Adam.
Yeah. That's
well, there's a tradition of dropout culture in the United States going all the way. I mean, you could consider the first colonists to be dropout culture people, but I think there's precursors of it in the diggers and some of the labor movements and some of the other people that just wanted to say, look, the rest of society sucks and we're going to start our own. And that's been going on in the United States since the beginning, as I said. But the contactees, I think, were just a new version of that. And then a whole, new thing of a new establishment to contend with, and that establishment could destroy the planet in a few minutes. And I think that's what drove a lot of what was going on in the contactee movement was, one, a sense of powerlessness and taking that power back, and two, fears about an atomic nightmare, about the whole world being blown up. And what's the first thing that most of these aliens said when they talked to people? Oh, stop making those atomic weapons. Of course they did, because that was the biggest fear everybody had at the time. And if you could have a sort of I guess aliens ex machina to sort of save us, and if we didn't save ourselves, maybe that's what people would have more faith in than somebody saying, well, Jesus will keep the bombs from going from being launched. But but they didn't have the technical know-how that the aliens had to keep these bombs from being launched. So it was a birth of various new religions, a new movement, and that those messages are still being sent to people now. It's just that this was a new thing in the late 40s, early 50s, when people realized, we could be vaporized in seconds and not even know it. So, and that and that dropout culture led into another dropout culture as soon as the baby boomers came of age, and that became the hippie movement. Before that, concurrent with the contactees, you had the beatniks, which was another type of dropout movement that was against the establishment for different reasons.
Yeah, I was going to weigh in with the beat movement. A lot of the poetry coming out of that scene was totally, these poems about how the atomic bombs were evil, Yeah. Same message that was coming from Orthon, that we had to elevate above this and transcend our human warlike ways. We're still having these arguments today.
Well, the FBI investigated some of these guys and said that they thought that they were communists.
Yeah, that's something else. I did a little spiel on this on Coast to Coast, and I pointed out some of Nick Redfern's work where he dug up a lot of the freedom of information stuff, and a lot of the FBI investigations. They were looking at these dudes. It's like, what's going on with Adamski and Van Tassel, or have they been infiltrated by the communists or whatever? The same stuff they were, with the anti-war movement of the 60s, and there was some infiltration by whatever subversive movements in a lot of those organizations with pro-Russian or whatever subversive messages,
Well, a lot of these contactees, I mean, they talked about the messages that they received, that these outer space civilizations were utopian, moneyless, classless societies. And
there you go.
Back in the 50s, I mean, that's communism.
Yeah, well, it raised an eyebrow at least, or it got some people in government going, what's going on here? Is this a propaganda campaign?
Which it may very well have been.
Well, yeah, it might have been at some level, yeah.
Are there? Do we see any influence now here in the 21st century from the contactee movement? I mean, I know that the UFOs in general, now really, with the exception of possibly, like pop culture, cartoons, and things like that, doesn't quite have the influence that it did in the 50s. But do we see any remnants nowadays?
I'm not sure that we do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we do either, but the will to believe something that, because this used to be fringy. It's like, those crazy people. Now you've got I don't know what would have happened if the internet was available during the classic contactee days. It might have been, they might have taken over the government.
It would have, yeah, it would have been fucked up.
Trump would be tweeting about his favorite sayings from Orthon.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? It's just people. The ability to be able to find something to back up anything your stupid little mind comes up with is so easy now that it couldn't happen now. It's so dispersed. Everything is splintered into tiny little groups doing this and that. And like I said, there's love and light alien people. There's cooperating with the government alien people. There's wacky right wing Nazi alien people. And that's been kind of a theme throughout, actually, contact. One of the first people that talked about contact with other beings, other worlds, was William Dudley Pelley, right, Adam?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, he had, we know his history with the silver shirts and all that, and he claimed contacts with
ascended masters or something.
Yeah, beings from Sirius that influenced him. But yeah, getting back to your question, Tim, it seems like the best what's the word? The best angels or the best vibes that came out of the contactee movement have pretty much fizzled out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think, by the 70s or so. And it got replaced by, it's what Jerome Clark calls the, what do you call it? The dark age or the dark side of ufology. Dun, dun, dun.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Yeah, I definitely believe that. Like you said, the early contactees. I mean, it basically was a resurgence of the New Age movements from the 30s and 40s. They just took on the face. Instead of ascended masters or angels, they're now UFO people, and then probably started maybe in the early 70s. They got supplanted by the abductions and probing probes and fun things like that. Well, and the contactee movement was really hated by people who wanted to do serious studies on UFOs.
Boy, did they hate him!
Yeah.
It's really.
I've got recordings of some of those people saying, we just can't stand these types of people that are not doing this scientifically. It's like, yeah, that's still going on now. If we only believed it, if only science would come and save us, it would change everything and everything would be perfect.
This is not, that's one thing that I've become convinced of. Science has very little to do with this because, to me, this is what we call it a
it's just not the kind of science we have now. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to prove anything scientifically, how do you prove a UFO in a lab? I mean, it just, I mean, maybe you could create ball lightning or plasma or something like that, but that's not, UFOs as we know them. These are what I call just anomalies, and maybe no two UFOs are the same. So
yeah, well, I think they're really based on who sees them. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that what's going on in UFO sighting is something happening between the witness or witnesses and the phenomenon, not some physical thing that you could go up and kick the tires of. And it affects people too. I wrote an essay about UFOs being a cosmic art movement. If you could create the kind of change in somebody's life that a UFO could, you'd probably be the most famous rich artist in the world. Because there's just so much going on there, and it completely upends all your, if you've got assumptions about how reality works,
or be a musician.
Yeah, and it mows all those things down. Yeah, some people are very well disposed to this, and they just integrate it into their cosmology. But other people are driven nuts into suicide, and they leave their families and all kinds of stuff. So,
well, my story. On LSD, I saw UFOs, so I integrated it, but was never something that I could go. That was a good analogy. Kick the tires.
Yeah, because I don't know if there's same thing with, I think, with Bigfoot or some of the Loch Ness Monster. I don't think there's any tires to kick there. There might be for a little while.
Kick his toes.
Yeah, kick his toes. There might be for a little while, but not in the way that we think that kicking tires or throwing a rock at something or whatever. That doesn't apply. I think with a lot of this paranormal stuff, it's in another paradigm that we're not used to yet. All those people that are into information theory and quantum physics. And even I had Eric Wargo, who's a really good interview about retrocausality and how the future affects the past, and how the human brain is the best quantum computer ever invented, and all these factors.
It all goes back to physical evidence, though. It's like I heard your friend Diane Pazolka talk about. She was involved in collecting physical evidence. That seems to be the linchpin for a lot of people. It always comes back to that. Can we actually collect some type of physical evidence that we can take back to the lab? And the argument, is that, well, we know about where we had these crashes or these sites, and let's go out there, but never seems to lead anywhere.
I think you can, and I think you can examine them. but I don't think they're the kind of physical evidence that people are expecting, or that is classical physical evidence. I think there's other factors going on there.
Me either, but that seems to where the argument always leads back to. We need some type of physical evidence to prove this thing.
Yeah, well, what's your definition of physical evidence?
Or whether
we had the best physical evidence guy on the show, John Peel and his alien glove artifact, which when they divorced, his wife ended up taking the glove, so it's lost. But I've got photographs of it.
Was this a probing glove, or what? What are you talking?
No. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I heard it visited you the night before, but that's a. No. Well, you'd have to listen to the show, but he found it in the desert, and the glove is a real miniature little glove, and it says "large" inside. And he found. And he found it at a UFO crash site.
It says what inside?
This guy,
large.
A UFO crash site. Yeah, large. He said large. Yeah.
Even though it's smaller than the palm of your hand.
Yeah, I saw this thing 30 years ago. I was in Florida, and somebody introduced me to him, and he had this thing in a shoebox that he had found. Very sincere, Tim. Very sincere guy, right? He's not
very much so. Yeah.
It's not. It never encompasses life. He was doing a charity run or something, and he ran across some old railroad tracks. And there was this, he had been in I think, Vietnam or in the war, right? So he knew about aircraft and stuff. And there was this aircraft there, and it was like nothing he had ever seen. And he scurried around and found this artifact. There were two of them. One he buried in the sand somewhere, but he knows where it is, but he's never been able to get back. We're trying to, start a GoFundMe site, so he can go back and find the other alien glove.
Sounds kind of crazy, but okay.
Well, yeah. What are you talking about? Crazy? It's not crazier than anything in your book.
Well, what's this have to do with aliens? He found a glove. Was there a sighting?
Yeah, it was UFO. Well, yeah. The UFOs followed him back and created a storm. It was like they were trying to get the physical evidence back.
I'm not saying crazy is a bad thing, but
yeah.
Well, the picture I saw of it, and from his description, I mean, it sounds like it was part of, like a pressure suit. The way that the way it zipped on the inside, and the way that the sleeve fitted. So, I mean, we were speculating that possibly it was part of one of the early, flights where they use like monkeys or chimpanzees as pilots.
Oh, I found a book in the library. What was it called? Did you see that one, Adam? That I found. It was called it was called the Flying Saucers Monkey Business.
Yeah, we visited that in some library there.
It was a UCLA library.
Yeah.
They have a massive UFO book collection. Ooh. And what I found was this photocopied Xerox 1970s monograph by some guy called Flying Saucers Monkey Business. So I had to take a look at it. It's like, what the hell? And what it was is this this guy had the author had, his theory was that every single UFO crash that had been reported that supposedly had aliens in it were because of United States government tests with monkeys.
Oh my gosh!
And rockets. So that was Flying Saucers Monkey Business, and I truly would love to find a copy of that for sale somewhere, just to have the title on my shelf.
Should have tried to sneak it out.
I'm not going to steal from the library.
Well, one of the first UFO books about 1948 or 49 was Flying Saucers Up a Tree, I think it was called.
That's a great title.
What happened, Rover? Did you tree one?
Okay, tell us the story, Tim.
Yeah, what was
I'd like to know that one.
I've never read the book.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know the story on that. So I'm out on a limb over the trees. I can't tell you that.
Okay, now so between the two of you, both of you, which story in your book do you think is probably the most batshit crazy story out of all of them? Because some of them, they seem to be pretty serious and sincere, and others you're just like, ooh, they were off their med big time.
A guy named Lee Childers, who was Prince Neosum, and I'm sure Tim probably met him too.
Never met him, but he was kicked off the Long John show.
Well, yeah, that was his claim to fame. He was like, he was so off the wall that he was the only one that was ever that Long John kicked off his show because he was too bizarre. But this guy, off the top of my head, he was a baker in Detroit and somehow had a vision and claimed that. He made these claims like he went on more flying saucer trips than anybody. Like there was like 250, and he was on these. Oh, one of his things was he's claimed that he got sick on one of the flying saucer flights, and he had to hang his head out a porthole and throw up. I don't know how that
works. Got space sick.
And so he gave a big press conference in New York, and it was around the same time as the Long John Nebel thing, and he claimed that he had some type of rejuvenation machine and that the Men in Black had killed him a number of times, but then he'd been rejuvenated by it. Then he went on Long John Nebel and claimed that they were going to have a UFO show up outside overhead, and it was going to rebroadcast that episode around the planet. And at some point, Long John got so frustrated and thought this was such BS that he just gave him the boot from the show. One other anecdote
didn't buy the gaff.
Yeah.
That was his big phrase.
Another anecdote was that Van Tassel, who was pretty, he never talked bad about any other contactees, but he had a bee in his bonnet about Lee Childers because Lee Childers had bad teeth. This is Prince Neosum, and any true intergalactic traveler would not have bad teeth. So,
well, he didn't go through the integratron. That's for.
Well, yeah, that would have rejuvenated his teeth. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Who would you say had the most UFO contacts? I have it down to 2 people.
Oh God, I don't know. I was trying to answer the batshit thing. I think it'd be a tie between.
Go with batshit, yeah.
Okay, it'd be a tie between. Wait, let me look here. For me, it'd be a tie between Richard Shaver and who was the other one?
Well, Billy Meyer had a whole hell.
Yeah, Billy Meyer is pretty wacky too.
No, the two would be Hal Wilcox, claimed over 100 rides.
In the book. Hal Wilcox is in the book.
Yeah. And the other one would be Chief Standing Horse.
Yeah, he's in the book as well. Actually, I mean, they all claimed at one time or another that they had whatever hundreds.
Yeah.
But it's like you get to a certain point, it's like, okay.
All right, guys, we're only about 3 minutes before the close of the show, so let our audience know where they can find this book and where they can find your online presence as well, if you want them to know.
Well, yeah, just it's go to Amazon where everybody goes. A is for Adamski, the golden age of the UFO contactees, I think would be the best advice. And Greg has other things going on. Greg?
Well, I always have my show going on, Radio Misterioso, Misterioso. It's spelled like it is in Spanish since I'm from Southern California. And
second best show on the internet.
Yes, you're right. Thank you so much.
It is a good one. It is a good one. Yeah, both you guys.
It is.
And of course, Tim S. mentioned my books at the beginning there. Thank you so much. There's far more books by Adam Gorightly than I have up. The last one was that I did was It Defies Language, which I'm very happy and proud of. Come on, Adam. What about a couple of your other books?
Oh yeah, they're on it. Let me think. Historia Discordia. I mean, it's varied topics. I've delved into Discordianism and in a few books, and
Charles Manson. That's
Charles
one of my
Manson as well. The Shadow over Santa Susana. Then a kind of travelogue book that's called what the hell's it called?
Happy Trails to High Weirdness.
Thanks, Greg. Conspiracy Theorist Tour Guide. It gets hard to remember a lot of the titles.
All right, guys, I'm going to have to shut you all down.
All right.
Think of when you have 305 titles. Don't forget our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO Secret Files, and the forthcoming, we hope, Jeff the Talking Mongoose should be out next week. God willing, and KDP getting their shit together.
Good night, all.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.